Hi everyone, and welcome to StudioJake Movie Makeover Masterpiece. On this podcast, we take a film that on paper should have been good. Maybe it had a dynamite director, an awesome cast, the trailer just dazzled you, but when you saw it, whether at home or in the theater or you saw it through a streaming service, whatever the case may be, you were like, where did this go wrong? Myself and a special guest, we're going to be talking about these movies, where they went wrong, and how we can fix them. So sit back, relax, and welcome to StudioJake Movie Makeover Masterpiece. In this penultimate episode, Atlas Society CEO Jennifer Grossman joins me to discuss the movie adaptation of the Ayn Rand play, The Night of January 16th. The play is an interactive courtroom drama with themes of individualism and strength. However, the movie took a different turn. Focusing on the murder and subsequent investigation, it completely ignored the themes that Ayn Rand placed inside the story. Ayn Rand herself hated the film adaptation, and the box office proved to support her hesitation. Mrs. Grossman and I will talk about how to fix this movie, and as usual, spoiler alert. Jennifer Grossman, how do we fix The Night of January 16th, the movie?
Well, fortunately, we have some notes. We have the original play that Ayn Rand wrote and that she updated. But it would be a completely different, tear it all down, start from scratch in terms of revision, because the play that she wrote was very unconventional. It was very kind of shocking and took a lot of creative risks, which is interesting in and of itself, because she wrote it at a time to make some money, because she was in the process of writing her first novel, We the Living, and she was running out of cash. So it is interesting that she chose to write something that was going to be very, very provocative. It was not the kind of conventional film that ended up becoming. But I also, there's a lot of things in the film, if you just look at the film aside from what her intentions were originally, there were still a lot of things that I thought were charming and that could be enjoyed just within the genre of sort of a period whodunit, crime drama.
Right, and one thing too I noticed is with the film, and as a fiction writer myself, and as someone who loves literature, I've read We the Living and The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, as well as her play Ideal, which I think is incredibly underrated. I love Ideal. And one thing you get used to, being someone who's into literature, you get used to people changing things for a movie, whether for running time or for other reasons, like they want to sum it up or put a little twist so it's not quite the same as the book. But one thing I thought was interesting was they completely changed genres for the film. So for those unfamiliar with the play, which there are a lot of great recordings of the play on YouTube, I highly suggest you go watch one, because the play is really enthralling, especially if you have a good cast of actors. And it's a courtroom drama, and it was an interactive play, and so they let members of the audience decide the outcome of the trial, which I thought was really cool. But the movie is this sort of noir murder mystery. It's black and white, and like I said, they had, my understanding was a previous, we're kind of getting into the film's history. I know some people might think this is boring, but just bear with me for a moment, is someone had bought the rights to do like a straight adaptation, but then it went from company to company to company, and then eventually the script just got watered down to where it's really just recognizable in title only, and that was something I didn't really understand. And the courtroom scene in the movie is very short. It's only like 10 minutes and the movie's about 90 minutes long, I think. But what part, is there something that you think, because Ayn Rand's reaction to the movie was extremely poor, which I don't blame her. They completely changed it. Do you think that her reaction to the film had more to do with the quality of the film, or just how they adapted it in general?
I think it had to do with the fact that it was just a completely different story and completely different characters, completely different, theme than she had originally intended. So her unhappiness over the outcome began really with the play version itself. So she wrote the script. It got roundly rejected. She had a producer who had put in an offer, but the terms that he wanted to have, essentially ability to make the changes, were not acceptable to her. And so they went through a negotiation. She eventually accepted it. But then she really, she had buyer's remorse because it turned into something that she felt sort of disgusted. And as we incorporated in the My Name is Ayn Rand, Draw My Life, it was a pivotal creative turning point for her as a writer. As I do the voiceover, I say, I wrote a script, then I wrote play. They made it into a movie, and they ruined the entire thing. They turned the heroes into villains and the villains into heroes. So I do it in my Russian accent. But then, she was not just going to be defeated. She got this idea of a creative genius who will not compromise his integrity for the sake of success. And so that is, of course, what then led her to create her vision of this ideal man, which she did in The Fountainhead. And, without putting a spoiler in terms of what happens to The Fountainhead, it's about someone who is a creative genius and how he reacts when his creation is just completely distorted and created into something else. And it's a very violent reaction.
Yes. Yeah, and that's another one that had a movie adaptation that she didn't care for. And this is one area which, of course, again, I'm not the creator of this, but I actually liked the movie adaptation of The Fountainhead. I know it cut out like tons of stuff from the novel, but really the novel could be a mini series. Like, it's incredibly thick and incredibly detailed, sort of like how Lord of the Rings is, with a lot of exposition and whatnot. It's very beautifully written. But back to the night of January 16th, one of the things I kind of chuckled about in the film version versus the play. In the play, the witnesses always say the name of the play. They say, like, the DA or the defense attorney will ask, when did this happen? The night of January 16th. But in the movie, there's a scene where the DA is questioning someone, and they said, when did this happen? And he says the night of January 15th. And you're like, what? like where did this, because the things they were talking about took place before the death that causes the plot to go in motion, but you're still like, there was no dramatic the night of January 16th like there are several times in the play. And I think that's also where about it loses focus. Now, as far as one of the reasons for me, I can see why it was so disappointing, is I felt like the cast was actually pretty good for when the film was made. I have the exact year right here. It was made in 1941. So it's got, Robert Preston and Ellen Drew. And I believe Ellen Drew, she was kind of up and coming. It's made by Paramount Pictures. So it has like this really good pedigree for a film. And do you think that the way they changed the story had more to do with, they thought maybe the play wasn't adaptable, so they just kind of took the concept and stuffed it in? Or do you think it just had more to do with that typical, Hollywood knows better than the original creator, which we see that happening a lot with other properties?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think that and that was those were the times, right? I mean, era, producers and the battle, the kind of power balance between, a writer who could come in and say, this is the script and this is how you're going to do it. I mean, there's many famous examples of, Leon Uris, has written books about what it was like to be a novelist, and then to go into the Hollywood system at the time, and then just the, how completely unheard of it would have been for a writer to be able to have that kind of creative agency over the work. But that, that you mentioned the name, the title. I mean, that was one of the things that that Ayn Rand didn't like, that she had the original title was Penthouse Legend, which I thought was, pretty good and could have still, fit this movie. Except, of course, the movie really was not about this man of mystery that was behind the scenes. The movie was more about, yes, there was a mystery, but also it was sort of this evolving, love story, and it was also different from a lot of Ayn Rand's love stories and love triangles, and that this one sort of, ended well. She had, the book that she was working on at the time, We the Living, that there was a romance, but in the conditions of Soviet Russia, it was impossible for it to end well, and so it kind of, well, you'll have to read the book. And it, the Fountainhead,
which I highly recommend, by the way. I've read We the Living. It's a fantastic novel.
It is, and the other thing that I liked about her her play, as well as Night of January 16th, or really as she had originally entitled it, Penthouse Legend, and then she had a secondary title, which I thought was also wonderful, which was Woman on Trial. It was much more centered around the protagonist, the female lead. So, the night of January 16th, it just was kind of like random, and that's why I think, just as you pointed out, having putting so much on this concept when it really was just not aligned with what was being presented. But I did think it was, I think they wanted to make it a popular movie, and they made the choices that were aligned with what the audiences of that time, or what they thought the audiences of that time would like. But of course, it would have been much more risky, with much more chance of failure, but also with a potential chance for something completely, unconventional and daring, which is what I think the original intention was, to present a completely different way, not just of framing the action within a courtroom and then having the outcome determined by the audience, and have that outcome also serve as sort of a commentary on the competing themes within the movie. But that's not, as we know, where they went with this. It was disappointing, but again, if you haven't read the book, I think there is also, I know we're here to fix to fix it. But I also, I guess I can't help it. I did find a lot of things in the movie that, if I could separate that experience, that I thought, were charming, including maybe the one thing that that survived was that there was still a benevolence, that there was that a great evil was averted, but the film was completely different from sort of even a political, because in some ways this play was not, and the movie was not explicitly political, but it did, at the end of the day, like when I'm talking about it being kind of conventional, like, okay, the evil bad guy who's a millionaire, as opposed to Ayn Rand, taking that stereotype and turning it, on its head.
Right, and this goes to this question. If you wanted to see the movie adapted today, how would you like to see it be adapted? We talked a little bit about this, before we started recording, but I really would like to hear your thoughts because, like you said, the movie, messed with some of the themes that Ayn Rand had, and I'm curious, like, if a movie was to get a modern adaptation, if whoever bought the rights and took the screenplay of the play and wanted to do a faithful adaptation, how would you advise them to make the film? What would you like to see captured in the film?
I would love to see someone, just in staying true to that very kind of innovative approach that Ayn Rand took. I would love to see someone take a technologically innovative approach to create an animated series, but to do so within, let's say, a virtual reality context, so that that actually you could have sort of a hybrid where there were characters, but there was also the audience's ability to come in and to be in the audience, to be as a part of that jury, and to have it based on the viewing audience at any time, have people be able to cast their jury ballot, and then perhaps have at the end a commentary by Ayn Rand, animated, in which she would then either cast the verdict, guilty or innocent, for the audience, because that's really part of what she was trying to present, that it wasn't just that there was a person on trial, the protagonist, but that it was the audience that was on trial in terms of their sense of life. And so that might be a fun way to go about it.
That would be really interesting. I would love to see that, and we're getting steps closer to that. I mean, Netflix already has specials on where you, as the audience member, can choose an outcome for films. So that would actually be really really interesting to see how they would do that and bring in you as the audience member, like in the original play, could choose guilty or innocent, or if you're at a standstill, whatever the case may be. That would be really interesting. Now, final question, and I really want to get your thoughts on this, is when I'm talking to someone and they want a list of books to read that deal with free markets and freedom of expression and things like that, I always tell them to read Anthem, which, of course, you produced a comic book version of, a graphic novel, which I reviewed, which everyone go read my review of the Atlas Society's adaptation of Anthem, the comic book version, and then go buy it. Like, that's just go ahead and give my website a couple of links, and then go buy it from the Atlas Society, because it's a fantastic graphic novel. And I always tell people to start with Anthem, because it's one of Ayn Rand's simpler books. It doesn't have a whole lot of exposition. It's a dystopian kind of science fiction book, really well written about a man's escape from a collectivist society. But if someone was to come to you and say, hey, I would like to read Ayn Rand, but I don't know where to begin, because all her books are standalone, which is fantastic. Where would you recommend people start?
Well, I really tailor my recommendations based on the individual. So, yeah, a good standard recommendation is Anthem, because it is shorter, and the comic book version, that we had illustrated by Marvel Comics illustrator Dan Parsons, is very visually interesting and dramatic, and so if they're not a reader, they can go and they can watch the animated series that we did based on the graphic novel on any of our social platforms or on our website. But I still think that is also a good thing to read today, not just because of free market and the dismantling of civil liberties, but also because it brings us back to something very fundamental about philosophy and modernism, which is that as part of the Enlightenment project, we believe that we could know and we could name, and we could understand things. And one of the most jarring things from people just start to read the graphic novel or the anthem or listen to it on audio is that the language has been corrupted, okay?
Right.
And the word I has been abolished. And I think that is very interesting. And you see big social challenges that have a word that we apply to them, whether it's homelessness, and I'm like, really, that's the word we're going to use? That is already kind of limiting our ability to look at it. It's a housing thing as opposed to a different kind of crisis. So I would recommend that. I also, again, when I'm personalizing this, if it's someone who's interested in, it's a woman and or a young woman, and she wants to sort of read a coming of age story for another young woman, then We the Living is magnificent in that regard, and then also people that might be interested in like Solzhenitsyn or Frankl, that is in that genre of someone living through this collectivist nightmare that Ayn Rand experienced firsthand in Soviet Union. That said, if you really want to be literate and to kind of engage with ideas within the liberty space, it is important to read Atlas Shrugged, and I often run across young people that will say, "Oh, I'm embarrassed. I haven't read Atlas Shrugged yet," and I just say, "Well, I don't envy you because I don't believe in envy, but I wish I could be you." To have that adventure in front of you, to be able to, for the first time, go on that adventure. But then also there are a lot of people, and I also find predominantly men, that prefer nonfiction. They really just don't like reading stories, And so for them, there's wonderful nonfiction works that she wrote. The Return of the Primitive, Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. If you're really into art, you can go and you can read the Romantic Manifesto. So, and then also if you're not political, or you're kind of already in your priors in terms of like, well, I hate these guys and I hate those guys or whatever. Then the Fountainhead is for me the one novel that I find people that don't necessarily agree with Ayn Rand's politics, that they still related to it because they found it to be just beautifully kind of laid out in its intricacy, but also that it resonated with the theme of creative independence and not compromising your integrity for the sake of others.
And as a fiction writer, I of course recommend Ayn Rand's The Art of Fiction.
Yep.
She really now I don't think it's actually a book that she wrote. I actually think it's a collection of her speeches and letters where she discussed fiction. So they're spaced out way better than say like a craft book, which I always tell fiction writers, read craft books, but especially put The Art of Fiction by Ayn Rand on that list because she really knew fiction and how to write it and how to make very expressive characters, which is one reason me who usually doesn't like super thick novels, but I will read an Ayn Rand novel because like I said, her exposition is just really genius. All right. So Jennifer, where can people find more information about you and the Atlas Society?
Well, we are on social media, so check us out on Instagram, on Facebook, Twitter. Sign up for our newsletter, so you will also be the first to know about our events, about interviews like this one, about our programs like Atlas Intellectuals, Atlas Advocates, and about our new publications like the Pocket Guide to Postmodernism, which is up next, or our next two videos. My name is Ludwig von Mises, and my name is Bernie Sanders, which is coming up.
And thank you again so much for coming on. Like I said, I really wanted to get into, because I really wanted to get into this black and white film and its adaptation. So I really appreciate your commentary.
Thank you for the opportunity to come on and for having me watch the movie again. That was just a really fun experience.
And of course, everyone, if you want to get in touch with me, you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Parler, and Instagram. On Twitter, Instagram, Parler, it's @RealJacobArey. Facebook is author Jacob Arey. Go check out my new website, which is StudioJakeMedia.com. And of course, be sure to like this video, share it out to all your friends, and subscribe and ring that little bell. We'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.